Zdravo svima, moje ime je Danica Banzić, a vi gledate novu epizodu Finesenog podcasta. Sa nama je danas Dejv Birs, koautor jedne od naših najprodavanijih knjiga Kako doći do moćnih ideja. Čovjek koji je pojam kreativnosti demistifikovao i zapravo predložio drugačiju teoriju kreativnosti i inovativnosti. Inače, Dejv je u Beogradu delom i zbog novoobjavljene knjige Trenje, koja se u originalu zove The Friction, čiji je koautor, a meni se nekako čini da ove dve teme ne idu jedna bez druge, te mi je posebno zadovoljstvo što ću danas moći sa njim da govorim o svom tom trenju oko dobrih ideja. Razgovor ćemo voditi na engleskom jeziku. So, Dejv Birs is an author, educator, public speaker, and consultant of many huge brands who actually helps them to get to the greatest ideas, yeah?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, as you can see there, I find it difficult to just do one thing.
I see it. Yeah, it's difficult for you. And on the other hand, I was reading your book, How to Get to the Great Ideas. So you said that you actually, and I quote, you're mortified when you are introduced as the creative guy. And even moreover, you said that the word itself bothers you that much that you even considered reducing it from the throughout the book.
Yes.
How come?
I think there's so many misunderstandings about creativity. It can actually cause more problems using the word. Because there's people who say, oh no, I'm not creative. But I don't see a difference between people who are creative and people who aren't apparently creative. It's just the difference between people who use their minds to try and come up with something new and people who aren't willing to do that. So creativity, a lot of people think that it's a gift that some people have and other people don't have. And I don't believe that. And I get asked very often, can you teach our staff how to be more creative? And my answer is like, no, but I can teach them to be less uncreative. Because the truth is that we all start out creative and we learn how to not be creative over time. There was a study done by NASA many years ago where they had this issue that they felt their engineers were coming up with the same kind of problem, the same kind of solutions again and again. Therefore, it wasn't very creative what they were coming up with. And they wanted to do this study to find out, why was that? And they started the study with kids. Now, at the age of 5, 98% of kids have got a genius rating in creativity. So using this skill they had, that 98% of 5-year-olds were geniuses creatively. And that drops off really fast. From the age of 8, it goes down to like high 70s. And then by the time people are in their mid-teens, less than half. By the time people reach the age of 30, this study showed that 98% of people do not score as creative geniuses. So it goes from 98% being creative geniuses as 5-year-olds to only 2% at 30. Now, why is that? Well, we learn to not be creative. We stop using the creative muscle. We are paralyzed by the fear of saying something new that other people might think is silly. We are indoctrinated in education that there is a right and there is a wrong. And a lot of the time what creativity is about is embracing the maybe. You know, rather than the right or wrong. So there's so many issues round about the word of creativity that I've found that it can cause more problems than being helpful in discussions for me.
I can see that. But what's actually creativity in a way that, what would be the criteria to judge if something is creative enough or not?
Well, the way that academics try to judge it is they use two things. They say it has to be original, is the word that they use.
Like new, something new, brand new, okay?
And it has to be useful. So useful and original. I've got a problem with the word original. I don't think original is the thing we should be
How come?
aiming for, because it's very hard. I don't know if I've seen anything original in my entire life.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything that's been original and useful. So everything is a recombination of existing elements, which means that really, is it original? If you looked at the first smartphone that came out, could you say that was original? Or was it a recombination of a computer and a phone?
I see.
You know, so there's two things coming together to create one thing. So I don't think it's about being original, but I do think it's about being non-obvious. Most people, when they come up with ideas, they come up with obvious ideas, the kind of ideas everyone else would come up with. And a lot of what we have to do when we're trying to come up with new ideas is look for the stuff that isn't obvious, the stuff that other people wouldn't come up with. And the people who are good at that, we call creative people, because they're coming up with stuff that no one else is coming up with. They're not coming up necessarily with anything original, but they're coming up with stuff that is different. And that's really a lot of what it's about. So to me, to judge whether an idea is creative or not, it should be non-obvious. And I kind of draw this matrix. So on one axis, it should be non-obvious. On the other axis, it should be useful. If it's non-obvious and not useful, it's what we call whimsy. It's something that's not really, you know, it's kind of like artsy, but yeah, it doesn't really do anything. But most people play in the obvious area. And that's the whole thing. A lot of what I do is trying to take people away from obvious thinking to more interesting, non-obvious thinking. Because if you're doing something that other people aren't doing, you've got an advantage that other people don't have. And that's the way it works in business.
I think that on the other hand, people are a bit afraid of getting ridiculed, you know, because if you are going to this other side, completely non-obvious things, talking about them, working on them, people can watch you like. And like you said in your new book, The Friction, you actually talk about Nikola Tesla and how they actually saw him at that time, like some lunatic a bit. But today, when you actually look in retrospective of it, you can see that actually it's a genius in there.
Absolutely. And it's the thing that he was up against Edison. And Thomas Edison is basically, as you've drawn your light bulbs here. On the front of the book, there's a light bulb. And that's all because of Thomas Edison. And he was who Nikola Tesla was fighting against. Now, Edison was considered to be a creative genius, but he wasn't. And there's a real problem with the idea of there being the lone creative genius, the one person who has got this incredible mind that solves everything by themselves. I think that real creativity often comes from people getting together. And we're finding that over time, if you look at academic papers, we're seeing over time there's more and more collaboration in academic papers than there was in the past. The idea of the lone genius was a myth all the time, but we are moving faster, really fast away from that. And we're seeing far more collaboration. And one of the areas I'm particularly interested in is that there's been the collaboration of more humans getting together. And that means that you've got lots more perspectives. You can explore a bigger idea area when you've got lots of minds. But now, as we're seeing in the last couple of months, we can also collaborate with technology. So with ChatGPT,
exactly.
that is now one of the things. It's something that I talk about in how to get to great ideas, is that the future will be a collaboration with technology. And that's unbelievably what we're seeing in the last 2 months.
Talking about it, AI generated art.
Yes.
So we saw what things are possible with it. So that computers these days are capable of actually creating or producing some sort of art, music or the paintings or etc. So tell me, is that creativity? Can we call it, because it's new, you said it's new, okay. And the other hand, it's valuable. So is it creative? I
think that this is a really interesting discussion to have, because right now for most people, right, particularly artists, let me say that.
Yeah, they are.
Artists are saying, no, that's not creative.
Of course, yeah.
But of course they would.
Of course.
I'm currently doing an experiment. As from my books, you see that I do experiments.
Yeah.
And the experiment I've been doing is creating art in collaboration with AI.
Yeah.
So traditionally what happens is a human will come up with the visual idea, and then they use technology to help make it happen. So I've turned that on its head. I'm using technology to come up with the idea, and then I'm making it happen. And the way that I'm doing that is I do something in my spare time, if I ever have spare time, called lino cuts. And it's like wood carving, where you carve out the shapes on the linoleum, then you put ink on it, then you use paper, you print that onto paper. So you can create some really beautiful art with this. And what I've done is I asked various image generation AI services to create images of a lino cut of a bald man with glasses and stubble. And it came up with incredible images. And I have now transferred them onto linoleum, and I've cut them out, and I've created prints. And I'm hoping to do a gallery show in London in the next couple of months showing these. And when I show these at events, and I talk, do a lot of public speaking, and when I show these in my talks, I always ask people, this image was created by AI, and all I did was I just created it, turned it into a print. Is this creative? Is this art? 90% of people say yes. And I don't know if it is, but the whole thing is that because of what's happening with AI at the moment, I believe that our definition of creativity and our definition of art will change. It will adapt to the way things were going. Because art in the past, in the times of the Greek philosophers, they believed that painting wasn't art, wasn't creative. All it was doing was copying something in the real world.
The nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they believed in the Platonic ideal of nothing is perfect. It's the thought mug that's perfect. This is an imperfect example of a thought mug. So they believed that painting was an imperfect example of an idea. And they didn't see it as being creative. They saw it as copying. Now, if you're looking for images to do with creativity, painting is the first thing that comes up. So in the space of 2,000 years, we have changed our idea of what creativity is, what art is, radically from something that was not considered to be that at all to now being the pinnacle of creativity or art. So I'm fascinated with how that meaning can change and how that idea can change. And I believe we're going to see a radical change in how people view creativity and how they view art because of AI. And the people who are going to debate hardest against this are the people with the most to lose. It's the artists. And I have a lot of sympathy for them. I've been a musician. I've done art myself. I've got a lot of sympathy for them, but when technology is coming, it's you either get on board or you get left behind. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So at the moment, to answer your question, is this art? Is it creative? That is very much up for debate. Some people say yes, some people say no, but I believe that maybe 10 years in the future, maybe take longer, maybe won't take as much, people will absolutely be saying yes. That is creative. That is art. Machines can be creative. And I personally believe that they can.
Okay. Thank you. So let's talk a bit about the friction.
Yes.
So the latest book, that you co-author are with Sonyu.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was the moment, if there was any specific moment, when you two or you yourself realized that the friction is some important principle in our lives? And what is a good friction? And can you tell us a bit more about the friction in general?
Absolutely. I mean, Sun and I, we wrote a book previously. It's not in Serbian yet.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I saw it, of course.
Iconic Advantage. Yeah. And we're always debating each other and talking about concepts. Both of us are what we call contrarians. We're always looking at the other point of view. Mm-hmm. So if everyone is saying one thing, Sun and I are always going, yeah, but what's the other? Mm-hmm. What's the other thing we could say? What is it that could disprove what everyone's saying? So we don't like it when everyone jumps on a bandwagon. Mm-hmm. And we were talking one day about how everyone had been talking about going frictionless, particularly for web design. Mm-hmm. And for customer experiences, that we need to remove the friction. We need to go frictionless. And the two of us always challenging everything. We're like, is that real? Is that true? And I was saying, well, I get frustrated with that because when I work with clients and we're looking at digital experiences, I feel that people are forgetting that you shouldn't just remove the pain, which is what removing the friction is. You should also be looking to add the pleasure. Mm-hmm. And websites aren't doing that. The people who are doing user experience are only removing the pain. They're not adding pleasure. And from that, we realized, oh, hold on. Maybe this friction thing is wrong. This idea of going frictionless is wrong. Mm-hmm. So we started to look at that and question it. And we realized that, yeah, friction is actually really important. If you think of anything that means something to you in your life, your family, for some people it might be an expensive car. For some people it might be their wardrobe of fine clothes. Mm-hmm. For some of them it might be their career. It might be their musical ability. It might be their artistic ability. And all of that stuff takes friction to get it. It all takes friction. It takes effort, it takes time, it takes money. All of these are just different forms of friction. And then we realize that as you remove friction, things become meaningless. So if you look at people who win the lottery, on average, and this is a study that's been done in the UK and in the US, people who win the lottery tend to become bankrupt within 10 years.
Mm-hmm. I read about this guy.
So what's that about? You've just won $1 million, $10 million. A few years later, you're bankrupt? What did you do? And then you compare that to people who have got a business and they've worked hard on it, and after a few years, they sell their business for $1 million, $10 million. Are they going to be bankrupt in 10 years? Unlikely, because they've worked hard for that. And it's amazing that there's a far higher rate of bankruptcy for lottery winners than there is against everyone else in the population. And you would think that $1 million is $1 million, but it's not. You value it differently according to how you got it. Mm-hmm. If you're given $1 million, that's very different from having earned $1 million. It's the friction that gives the money its value. So we started to look at what are the different ways that we could add friction in a valuable way. And we came up with 7 different ways of doing it. And one of the things we sort of looked at is a great example from the 1950s. There was an amazing cake mix that was released in America. The Betty Crocker cake mix. Now this thing was amazing. All you did was you put the cake mix in a bowl, you added a certain amount of water, stirred it, put it in the oven. Boom, done. And it tasted just as good as a cake that had been baked yourself. So surely that's a great product. You just buy the packet, put in the water, oven, cake. Easy. And this is what they were selling it on. It's so easy. Make a cake, it's so easy. It wasn't selling. Why wasn't it selling? Well, they sent out psychologists. And today is International Women's Day, and I want to apologize because in those days they were very sexist. And it was all about housewives. It was all about the women. The women had their role, and it was in the kitchen. And the psychologists went and tried to find out why these housewives weren't buying this amazing cake mix. Mm-hmm. And they discovered that, well, actually, baking a cake isn't just ending up with a cake. It's about showing your love for your family. And if you do a shortcut, it feels as if you're cheating your family. So that just opened their eyes. They're like, oh, that's interesting. The product isn't really the thing that adds value. It's the process to create the product is what gives the value. So they slightly reformulated the product to make it slightly harder. And instead, what you did was you put the cake mix in a bowl, you added the water, and you added 2 fresh eggs. And by just this simple thing of just add 2 fresh eggs, they created the product. The product is still around just now. It was flying off the shelves. And that was extra effort that made that a successful product. When it was so easy, it wasn't successful. People wanted the extra effort because it meant more to them. So that was, for us, like the ultimate example of how friction actually added value to the product itself.
Yeah, I read it in your book. Yeah. It was great comparison. So we are so driven these days to reduce as much friction as possible, and all of it for the sake of some free time, much more free time. And I don't know how, but it ends up like we still don't have any free time, or not that much. So what do you think? Are we actually busy with the right things these days? Are we binging too much? And we saw these health reports and saw how the sedentary life actually are taking the toll on our health. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, when people say they're busy, it's what are they busy with? Because we see that there's, I believe that online gaming is at its highest it's ever been.
Yeah.
You're finding that Netflix is continuing to have sort of increased amounts of hours. When you look at these online video platforms, you know, there's more and more viewers. So what are we busy with? There's a difference between being busy and filling your time. And this is what most people don't understand. Now, when I say I'm busy, I mean that I'm still doing work at 11 o'clock at night with a laptop in my knee. I'm busy. That's, you know, it's probably not healthy for me, but I can honestly say I'm busy. But being occupied is different from being busy. In How to Get to Great Ideas, I put forward that I believe there's 4 different modes that the brain operates in. And you can exercise your mind. So that's actually putting your mind to work on something. You can feed your mind. So you're putting new information into your mind. You're learning new skills. You can rest your mind, go to sleep, do some meditation. It's all good. Or you can occupy your mind. Occupying your mind is, I guess, Kardashians and Angry Birds and all of these kind of things, right? Occupying your mind is the lowest value. I'm not saying it's got no value, but it's the lowest value of those 4 modes. Resting your mind is really important. And certainly feeding your mind and exercising your mind are really important. But there's just so many people occupying their minds. And when I used to run creative departments in the advertising industry, I remember going around and seeing people on Facebook. And I'd go into their office and there'd be creatives there and I'd say, so what are you doing? And say, oh, we're looking for inspiration. On Facebook, you're looking in the wrong place. And I would ask them to get out of the building. I'd say, take a pad and a pen, get out the building, go to an art gallery, go to a record shop, sit in a cafe, and come back this afternoon with some ideas. That's where you're going to find inspiration, in the real world, seeing interesting things, having experiences you wouldn't normally have. That's where you get inspiration from. Facebook is a platform that's designed to numb the mind and keep you scrolling. So it's a lot of people, they just don't understand how their brain works, and I try to communicate that. Yeah, and of course, all of that is friction, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it takes effort to keep feeding and growing our minds. In fact, growing your minds, you can actually in some ways, you can actually see when people grow their minds in a brain scanner. Mm-hmm. So there's the situation of London taxi drivers. To be able to drive a black cab, black taxi in London, you have to do a qualification called the knowledge. Mm-hmm. And the knowledge means that you have to memorize all of the 35,000 streets in London. You have to know where they all are. You have to know how traffic changes during the day to know that, do you go this route or do you go that route? Mm-hmm. You have to know the location of all the hotels, all the theaters, all of the tourist sites. Now, to get all of this information into your head, it takes about 4 years. And it takes people 12 or 13 times usually to pass the exam. Mm-hmm. But what they've done is they've put the people who do the knowledge into brain scanners. Mm-hmm. And they've found that there's an area of the brain, the hippocampus, it's mm-hmm. underneath. And one of the things that the hippocampus does, it's all about teaching new skills. So as you learn new skills, the hippocampus starts wiring stuff together. But spatial awareness is a big part of the hippocampus. Mm-hmm. And if you compare people's brain scans from before they did the knowledge to after they did the knowledge, you can see that the back part of the hippocampus has significantly grown. Mm-hmm. So our brains grow and develop according to how we use them. Mm-hmm. And they also prune themselves according to how we don't use them. Mm-hmm. So if we don't use certain skills, we don't use certain abilities, then we lose that our brain just cuts that out, because what's the point in maintaining a network that's not being used? Using up more energy than we need to, because our brains use a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. So as we don't exercise our brains, as we don't use our minds, we become dumber. We lose abilities. Our brain's getting rid of all that stuff. So it's important to keep the friction in, mm-hmm. to keep growing our brains, not occupying our minds, feeding our minds, growing our minds. Because if not, the alternative isn't that great.
Yeah, I guess. So you mentioned that you were running some advertising departments and you were working with a lot of people. So tell me, what do you think about the brainstormings and team buildings? Is this actually really the way to connect with your team and to actually make a friction and to actually get to the great ideas?
Brainstorms can be a lot of fun. They can be fun because you've got a bunch of people together in a room and it doesn't feel like real work. And usually hey, we've got some biscuits, have a cup of tea. And you get to stand around and stick Post-its on a wall and feel as if you've done something. However, brainstorming was invented in the late 1940s mm-hmm. by a man called Alex Osborne, who was the founder of an agency called BBDO, which is still going today. Mm-hmm. And what it was about getting people to generate more ideas, more interesting ideas. Mm-hmm. And in principle, brainstorms are good. Okay. But most of the time, they're not run properly. And therefore, they end up being really low value. So when companies have brainstorms, and normally what happens is you get someone goes around the office in the morning going, we're having a brainstorm, anyone free? And they get the people who aren't wanting to do their work. So they get the people who are the slackers already. Okay. Come on, into the room, let's have a brainstorm. And they get them into a room, and then they don't give them quite enough information. They say, right, this is our problem, this is what we're doing. Ideas, anyone? Ideas. And they stand in front of a flip chart mm-hmm. and start writing down ideas. Oh, there's so much wrong with that. So, first of all, when you've only told people, like, a version of the problem there, what you get is first ideas. First ideas are obvious ideas. So we're looking for the non-obvious. You get the obvious. Mm-hmm. You get social problems where you get the more confident people, the more extroverted people will tend to take over the brainstorm. And one of the things that we find from people who are overconfident is they come up with really obvious ideas. It's the people who aren't so confident about stuff come up with, well, maybe, and that's the interesting stuff, maybe is when you go, yeah, tell me more, let's explore that. But the people who say, yeah, well, I saw this thing that this other brand had done. Maybe we could do that. Okay, so we're stealing stuff from other people and using that. So you find that brainstorms aren't coming up with the great ideas. So there's certain things you can do to improve them. First thing is curate the right group of people. So bring the right group of people together, not just who is available or not just who is in your team. Go, right, what are the skills we need? What are the perspectives we need? What's the knowledge that would help? Who are going to be the best people to help with that? Right, let's get them together in a room. All right, at that point, you have got a much bigger thought area to explore because you're going to get different perspectives. Mm-hmm. Next thing, give people a proper brief in advance, at least 24 hours before you hold your brainstorm.
Okay.
And tell them that they need to come to the brainstorm with 3 ideas. Now, what happens is that brainstorms, if you get people together, you get confirmation bias. And somebody says an idea and everyone just goes and like gathers around that idea. Mm-hmm. And you end up just exploring this small little thought territory. If you ask people to come up with ideas in advance and they come to the meeting, when people come up with ideas on their own, they will come up with much more diverse ideas, much more interesting ideas. So you've got people coming to the group with far more ideas just ready to kick off thoughts in the group. Mm-hmm. Then you make sure that there's not somebody standing in front of a flip chart asking for ideas.
Why is that important?
Because you create this funnel that only one idea can be thought about at a time. Mm-hmm. Because you're waiting, there's that one person that everything's going through, which means that there's other people in the room who are going, oh, there's that thing. Oh, the conversation's gone in a different direction. Oh, never mind. You've lost that thought.
So what are you suggesting? If not a flip chart, then everyone should write for themselves?
Well, that's one way of doing it. And I like to mix it up in groups. So I don't call these brainstorms because I think brainstorms put people into this kind of like mode. But when I'm getting people thinking in groups, I find that it's best to mix up personal thinking time with small groups thinking together before you then expand it to the large group. So I go for individual, small group, whole room.
I see.
And that can be a fantastic way of doing it. Because by using individuals, you can get far more diverse ideas. When you've got like 2 people or 3 people working together on each other's ideas, then they can give different perspectives and they can help grow it and develop it and sense check it. And then you've got the whole room together and then they can go, yeah, that's a great idea. We should be doing that. Other people will start to bring their perspectives in and you start thinking about how you would actually make it happen. Mm-hmm. So brainstorms, and another problem is that brainstorms very often don't tend to lead to proper outputs. So people come up with a bunch of ideas and then they're left on a flip chart. And then everyone goes, oh, that's it. Oh, that's it. I need to run to another meeting. Mm-hmm. And off they go. And there's a whole load of ideas on a flip chart. And what they do, well, let's get the intern to just type them up. So the intern types up these badly written ideas that are just like one sentence of what if we made shoes out of cheese up there. And the intern starts typing these out and then a document gets sent round and people look through it and go, nah, there's nothing. There's nothing. And it's because the ideas weren't sufficiently articulated. So I make sure that when we're running idea sessions, we find ways of exploring as much territory as possible, which is what we call, you've got divergent thinking. So you're coming up with loads and loads of options. And then we have to go through a convergent thinking stage, which is getting it down to the best stuff, then articulating that best stuff in a way that we'll be able to understand at a later date. And then we might vote on those, or we might leave it just now to develop them a little bit more, and then we'll vote. But I make sure that at the end of it, there are very definite outputs, which is why there's a lot of companies that like to use me for their workshops, because I give them very strong outputs. They know that they're going to get something that they'll be able to do something with at the end.
Yeah, I got something today, because this brainstorming, but gradually, it's really a great idea. So you are the creative guy, the most creative guy.
I understand bits about creativity.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm a creative guy. I don't.
Okay, if you say so.
Other people can say that, but I won't.
Yeah, okay. Now, I saw your TEDx speech with the nudge, and I was really enjoying watching this.
Yeah.
You know, you smashing all of those gadgets, etc. And I saw what is behind it, and I heard you loud and clear telling us that actually the distractions throughout the day through these gadgets are actually bringing us to the shallowest of our thoughts, and how can we avoid it and come to the depth of our thoughts?
You know, it's difficult because there's been research done into how people use mobile phones. So for those who haven't seen the TED Talk, basically what I say is that we've got a problem at the moment because to be able to solve problems properly, you need to dive deep, have some isolated thinking time to really wrap your mind around the problem. But as we keep getting notifications on our watches, on our phones, on our computers, it causes us to resurface. And each time we get a notification, we resurface and then we have to dive again. And we're getting shallow thinking rather than deep, proper thinking. Because what happens when you start to come up with ideas is you come up with a bunch of ideas and then you feel, I can't come up with any more, I must be done. No, you're not done. That's when you take a break. Go for a walk, go and get some inspiration, read some stuff, work on something else, come back, maybe have a sleep. I'm a big fan of sleep. Sleep is great for the brain.
Tell that to mother of two. So
yeah.
You don't need to tell
I've got a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old. Oh my goodness.
Oh, so you know the deal,
yes.
But mama knows it better. Okay.
So then you come back again and you try to come up with some more ideas, and you'll come up with some more ideas, and then you'll feel as if you run dry. Right. This first level here, most people give up after the first level. So maybe 90% of people, that's a made up figure, 90% of people give up. And then you go again, come up with some more ideas, and then 90% of them will give up. You keep going. And as you keep going, you keep trying and come up with new ideas. It's that final bit there means that you're one of the 1%. In trying to come up with ideas. People are always looking for shortcuts.
Yep.
And there's no shortcut. And this is the thing, that people who are looking for hacks, there's no hack. There's no hack to this. There's technique, there's attitude, but there's no hack. It's actually about feeding your mind with all the right stuff that then becomes the ingredients. And if you don't feed your mind with very much stuff, and it is all chewing gum and Kardashians, then you've got a narrow input. A narrow input leads to narrow output.
Yeah.
If you've got really broad input, and you know the mating dance of penguins, and you know about Victorian guttering, and you know about the sewing techniques of some tribe in Central Africa, and you know, if you've got all of that interesting, diverse, weird stuff, and you're spotting stuff that no one else is spotting, you can come up with ideas that no one else can come up with, because you've got ingredients going into your head. It's like a larder or your fridge. If you go to the larder and all you've got is a packet of crisps and a bottle of ketchup, you cannot make lasagna. You can try, but you cannot make lasagna. You know, you need to have the right ingredients. And if you've got interesting ingredients, you can come up with stuff that makes people go, wow. And that's what it's all about. So it takes effort, constant effort and habit. And lazy people might not be willing to do that, but I can tell you the pleasure you get from coming up with ideas that no one else has come up with. Yeah, that's the bit that makes all of the effort worthwhile. Because the one thing we do know is that doing creative acts, coming up with creative ideas, creative thinking, is stuff that has a huge effect on people's well-being, on their happiness.
Yeah.
So I personally am a ridiculously happy person.
That's
I mean, bad
great.
things might happen in my life, but I smile a lot. And it's because I'm always doing stuff, making stuff, creating stuff. I feel incredibly lucky.
That's great. I mean, it's not that common to hear this kind of statements like, I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm a happy person. Yeah.
Part of it is because I'm old. And the one thing that we do know is that as people get older, particularly when you start to get into my time of life, people get happier. They become more content. A lot of the stresses start to drop away.
Okay. Okay. So I like your statement about the creativity. You said it's more like an attitude, more than anything else. It's not a concept, it's not a principle, it's just the attitude. So you need to change it or adapt it. So since there are many entrepreneurs that are actually that follow our publishing house, they are reading our books, they will watch this podcast. So
hello, welcome entrepreneurs.
What will make them successful? What do you think that will be the thing that will make people, entrepreneurs or companies more successful in the future regarding all of this that we were mentioning today, like the friction and the ideas and the creativity?
I think it's interesting. There's some people aren't very good at being entrepreneurs who are hugely creative. And I think I might fall into this kind of category, although I'm not saying that I'm hugely creative. I love shiny new objects. I love coming up with new ideas. And that makes me a bad entrepreneur because I can't focus on any one thing. A good entrepreneur understands when they've got a great idea and focuses on it.
I see.
Then when their creative bit comes in, is not on coming up with more ideas. The creative bit then comes in, how do I execute this idea in the most interesting way? How do I engage the audience in the best way? How do I find a gap in the market that no one else is filling? How do I take the expectations that the rest of the industry has, turn that on its head, and do things in a way that makes people go, wow, I never thought of doing it that way. Because if you do things different in an industry, you get noticed. You've got an advantage. Sometimes you can do it differently in a bad way, but if you're doing it differently in a good way, in a way that actually offers benefit in some way, offers value to your customers, you're onto a good thing. So I think that it's this marriage of creativity and tenacity. So focus and sticking at something, because the more people who say, that's ridiculous, probably the more right you are.
Oh, great.
So I think that if you've got an idea that people go, really, you think that'll work? I mean, obviously there's some ideas. I think that making umbrellas out of fresh fruit probably isn't a great idea. But, if you're doing something that people in the industry go, I don't think you can do it like that, go for it. Push it. Try and find a way to make it happen. Because most people find it easier to say no than they do to have the tenacity to try out to see if it'll work.
That's great.
So I think that, I think that tenacity is a really important thing.
Tenacity, yeah.
But your creativity isn't, after coming up with the idea, your creativity is applied to all the different ways of how you make that idea happen in an interesting way.
And tell me, what are you reading these days? Any books to recommend?
Do you know, I'm...
Something that we should publish?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, certainly my iconic Advantage book. Yes.
Of course.
Let's see. I consume a lot of stuff. At the moment, I'm actually doing university courses on history of human development. That's a big interest of mine.
That's where your knowledge about the Neanderthals and
Yes.
everything else
Yeah.
is coming from, yeah?
Yeah, so I do a lot of
read it,
reading
yeah.
on sort of evolutionary psychology, human development, and the sort of history of mankind, because we are actually a very young species. And a lot of people don't realize how young we are. So as much as humans have been around for about 250,000 years, 300,000 years, 400,000 years, depends who you listen to, you know. But it was only about 30,000 years ago that we had what we'd consider to be the cognitive boost. We started to develop language. We started to develop jewelry and art, and we started to come up with stuff like weapons and things. And as much as we'd had flint before that, flint was the only thing for years and years and years. And then, you know, we started to come up with interesting stuff. And then from that, about 12,000 years ago, up until then, we were out on the plains, running from beasts, hunting, gathering, moving around with the seasons to get food. 12,000 years ago, we invented farming in Mesopotamia. And then that started to grow into having cities, and we started to see cities about, you know, 3,000-4,000 years ago. And then we've been in this unbelievable accelerated journey in the last 150 years, 200 years, where from the Industrial Revolution onwards, just think of it, unbelievable. We went from pretty much poking the soil with sticks to creating machines that do amazing things, to creating airplanes, making it to the moon. You know, it's just unbelievable what we've done. Working at an atomic level to now nuclear fission, which is the thing we've been after for years, is apparently possible. You've got people working in teleportation. I don't know if they'll actually crack that, but we are just doing amazing things. And that to me is phenomenal, that we've had this absolute explosion, and it may be the end of mankind because we've accelerated so much and we're not ready for it, because our bodies are still built for 30,000 years ago. You know, and our minds are still built for 30,000 years ago. They've not got any faster. The world's get faster, but our brains operate at the same speed. So I'm fascinated with all of this and what it was like to be a human as mankind was developing. So that's a big part of what I'm working on at the moment, is really doing a lot of reading into that, and for really accessible versions of that. There's things like Yuval Noah Harari's books,
yeah, of course,
which are you know, they're
we
really
have them
good,
translated, and yeah,
brilliant. So that's kind of what if anyone hasn't read that, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so do you have anyone who inspired you this week that you would say it's some sort of, I don't know, lexicon question for this part of interview, but I would like to see if there was a person, maybe from your family or someone from the street or some celebrity or whoever who was, I don't know, inspiration for you this week?
Do you know, I think that my inspiration this week would actually be the man who is helping us do this right now, even Minich.
Oh, great.
Now, when I was on my way here to Belgrade on Monday, I was an idiot. I was nearly at the airport and I discovered I'd left my computer at home.
Okay.
With my presentation that I was talking at the conference this week and the workshop that I did today, all the stuff on my computer at home.
Okay.
And I was like, oh man, what do I do? Fortunately, all my work was backed up to the cloud. So I thought, well, maybe can I run it off my phone? Maybe I can buy a laptop at the airport. That's going to be expensive. So I sent Ivan an email, and it's Ivan's attitude. No problem. Don't you worry. It's all fine. I thank Ivan profusely. He's just like, it's okay. It's no problem. Least I could do. And his attitude of just nothing is a problem. I'd do anything for you. It's all good. And that to me, I wish I was more like that.
Oh.
Rather than I get stressed about things and it just even so chill. And that's he inspires me with his attitude.
That's great. I'm so happy to hear that someone from Serbia, and especially even who is actually providing us with this place where we can actually record our podcast, etc.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you actually pick someone like that. Yeah, that's great. And last question.
Yes.
Yeah. If you were a child today in 2023, what do you think you would like to become when you're grown up, you know? Well, so now just the ideas are completely different than they were when you were young, I guess. So what would be your wish, your greatest wish?
That is so interesting because when I got into advertising, I got into advertising because that was the only way that I could work with world-class photographers. I could play with film. I could work in radio. All of these things that I was excited about, working in media, making things. It's like, wow. That the only way to do that is to get into advertising, and I get into advertising. I got to play with all of that stuff. Now, don't need that, because I can create something and put it on the web to an audience of half of the world, and they can see it seconds after I've published it. Of course, most of them don't, but I can build my own audience. I can create my own stuff in a full artistic control. And I love that because I do a lot of that stuff. You know, it's like even the writing books. You know, it's a way of just getting stuff out. I'm about to create a YouTube channel that I'm really looking forward to. I'm creating more content. I do lots of stuff on LinkedIn. I make my own education courses online, and people take that. And you know, years ago, I couldn't have done that. But now technology allows me to do that. So the question, what would I want to do as a kid? I think I would have been so bamboozled with the options.
Yeah, exactly.
So many things I could do. I think as a kid, it'd be a very hard thing for me to decide. Because I'm the kind of person that wants to do everything. I want to try everything. And it's infuriating for my wife because Dave's doing a new thing. He's doing art now, or he's writing songs again, or, you know, and I'm always doing something that's new, where I'm challenging myself. And I think that to me is what I would want to do as a kid. I would want to do everything because now we can. And that to me is so exciting. It's opened up the whole world for me. So being able to do this kind of stuff. So even Sun, who I wrote the book with, Sun lives in San Francisco. I live in London. We are 8 hours apart, time difference. We still managed to make it work. So we've written 2 books together, and sometimes that will involve me hanging out with him in my evening, and when we're on Zoom talking to each other. It might be that he gets up early in the morning, we talk to each other, but we make it work, we make it happen. And this is the incredible thing about technology. I can do anything and I can work with anyone in the world. And it just creates infinite possibilities that still, as an old man, still excites me. I still get so excited by it.
Would that be your message to the children, or those that have this 98% of creativity? And
well, it's difficult. It's our education systems are what leads to people losing their creativity. There was it Picasso that said that, you know, the artist is the child who never grew up. So we're all creative as kids. The challenge is holding on to that as you get older. And I think that I would want that to be the message for kids, is that, you know, when the adults are telling you, no, this is the way that you do it, always just have that voice in your head just going, is it? Is there another way? And it's good to know what the rules are, but it's always good to have that questioning attitude of, can you do it another way? Can we break it? Because without those questions, the world doesn't move forward. The world just replicates the same way again and again and again. And the whole of humanity could fall into a rut It takes these people who question things and try to do things differently, the explorers of ideas. They're the ones who move the world forward. And that is such an important thing for us to not lose, to hold on to not give all our skills and energy away to technology, but to look at how we can leave the world a better place than we found it. That's what I'd want.
Great. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here and talking with me.
Thank you for putting up with me and my rambling stories.
And good luck on your exhibition that's coming up in London. I can't wait to see it. I'm following you everywhere, so I will manage to see it, yeah?
Yes, you will. I've not announced it properly on the social media stuff yet, but I'll announce it soon.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's it?
That's it,
Yeah, great.
Good.
It was good.
So still recording. Hello. Hello, this is the after bit. This is the bit that nobody else notices. Everyone else is switched off by now. But, you know, we could sing a little song together. How about that? That's all, folks.